Future Proof Mzansi, a podcast where we discuss how consumer behavior shapes our marketing plans. I'm Senna, joined in studio by Stacey, and we are colleagues at Kantar.
Thanks, Senna. So today we are going to be chatting about township marketing. Quite frankly, a subject that I find a lot of brand marketers in our country don't get perfectly right, which is kind of interesting given the fact of the percentage of our country that live within townships. And so this really is something we need to get right. And particularly, I think when we're talking in the context of global brands and how they work within our country to speak to the consumers that they serve.
Absolutely, Stacey. So that's why today we've recruited a true expert in the field. Donald Mokgale is the managing director of MoyaApp. He works closely with marketers and agencies to unlock access to mass market audiences via the powerful data-free messaging and content platform. He is also the author of Introducing Hibirism, a guide to Black Cultural Nuance. This thought-provoking book unravels the intricacies of Black culture across the class spectrum. Donald is a seasoned media and marketing expert and currently heads up the newly launched research startup, Hibirism Group. Donald, can you tell how excited I am to have you on Future Proof Mzansi? Hello.
I can tell. I love the positive energy you're giving as you're writing. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Nice to meet you guys formally and to finally have this conversation.
Oh, we are really excited. And I guess before we kick off, you have a pretty epic career and we would love to hear a little about that journey.
Okie dokie. Sure. Where do I start? Guys, I originally wanted to be an actor. Okay. And
are you sure you're not doing it at the moment though?
I mean, I kind of am. I'm an artist, right? So my parents were like, "You're crazy. There's no money in that thing. Don't you dare." Okay. So guess what? I chose advertising and marketing next. And guess what influenced it? Generations. Okay. Generation script, obviously based on the advertising industry. I know. Look at how it comes around. So I saw that, and that's how I was like, okay, that's actually the next best thing. Because strategically in my mind, I thought that's how I'm going to make my way back into acting. Because if I get into advertising, I'll be in close proximity to advertising, acting, and then I'll just kind of make my way back in there. So I went to go study strategic advertising at Boston Media House. And soon after, I then started working as a junior salesperson selling large format outdoor advertising. And then I started kind of growing in my career and then transitioned to selling community radio and then transitioned to joining an agency which specialized in out of home. It was an out of home specialist agency, and then worked my way to being the MD of that business, and then grew and I left the country to go live in Ghana to go start an agency there, and then moved to Kenya to run the agency there, then moved to Nigeria to step change the agency there, then came back to South Africa to lead the Africa region. And then I was privileged to join another media buying agency called Cara. So I ran that as the MD for a while. And then I transitioned to being the CEO of Out There Media Africa, which is a tech business across the region. This is now during COVID as well. Ran that for a few years. And then I went back to agency group to be group business director because I was gearing myself up to be the group CEO. By that time, the entrepreneurship bug bit real hard. And so that's when I was already co-authoring the book, Introducing Hibirism, and building out that business. So actually, I decided to rather transition into entrepreneurship as opposed to kind of agency leadership. So I went to go run Avatar Media Agency as the MD to grow that business for a while building my own and kind of finishing the book, published the book, launched the business, got a client for that business. And then MoyaApp also then came along, and I was like, oh my God, my book, MoyaApp, the synergies are ridiculous, right? So it just made sense for me to come run MoyaApp and invest in that business.
And that's
wow.
Yeah, exactly. That's
like, just
obviously
wow.
with no sleeping, like just like doing all the things. And then I have to know, are you doing any like acting on the side?
Oh my God, I forgot that part. So I'm a professional poet. I'm an award-winning slam poet. So what I did is I started doing theater and a lot of theater work, obviously, because that artistic passion needed to be fed somewhere. At some point, I saw a gap in the market, which was that a lot of the poetry artistic works is so esoteric, man. It's so like niche. And I was like, the problem with this niche thing is that all of us are marking our own homework. Why don't we take this to the people who should know this? So I started writing the kind of poetry that was witty, punchliney, and took it to corporate. So I started packaging it in a way that was meaningful. So I started performing for red carpet gala dinners. And then I met a really good friend of mine, now my business partner. We started a poetry storytelling business called Puns and Things. And through that, we performed for the president, we did red carpet gala dinners, we wrote bespoke poetry and music for, like for instance, I'll give you an example. Momentum have got what they call the Lesedi Awards. It's their annual performance awards. We wrote a theme song for that and many others. At some point, Capitec even found us and we wrote, you must please Google it, go to YouTube and say Capitec Slam Poetry and you'll see me and my band. So I've got a band, we then released music. So that was all running simultaneously with everything else that I've been doing. So yeah, Puns and Things is an actual business that runs kind of on a need to know basis. We do weddings, we do wedding anniversaries, we've done celebrity shows, launch of movies, we write bespoke poetry and music, and we entertain audiences. So again, using the marketing mind, I customize based on the target audience. Who's listening? Okay, then I'll use the right buzzwords that will appeal to that audience. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. So yeah, that's how I still fed the artistic passion whilst being an author and obviously an entrepreneur.
I'm like listening to you, but I can't let you get out of this interview without, since you mentioned generations, I'm a pop culture fanatic. So Tell me, greatest villain of all time and generations?
Probably has to be Kenneth Mashaba for me. And it's a bit of a toss-up between him and Ngamla, because
Ngamla so honorable
Jack, it's hard. Senna, oh my God, there's almost no wrong choice. Ntsigi was also once one of the ones, if you remember.
Right. Do you remember Ntsigi?
I remember
as well, the female versions and Anne, the female villains hit different too.
Oh my God, Anne was also
anyway.
Okay, let's
stop us. Stop us. Please intervene.
Stop us. Right, guys, I am just loving this energy. I feel like we're going to get so much when we're talking about marketing. And what I love is the whole what you're speaking about in terms of playing to your audience and understanding your consumer. And that's what we're here to do, right? So let's start with that exact thought. We're talking about township consumers. We're speaking about marketing to township consumers. Are there any misconceptions, any stereotypes that you feel that brands in South Africa play to when they're speaking to township consumers?
Yes, I think the first point is just the framing of the word township consumers. That is already problem number one. Is that consumers are consumers primarily. That's the first and starting point, right? That's how you should see, as a business, that's how you should think about your customers. Is who are my customers? The fact that they are from the township is neither here nor there, unless there's specific things you want to do as a result of knowing that they're from a township. So usually that framing is done very loosely as a way to just put people in a box. And the problem with that is, I'll give it a classical example, is Mavis, who lives in the township, travels on 3 taxis to get to Sandton. She's a domestic worker. Mavis gets to consume multiple marketing messages throughout her journey, and even when she's inside the boss's house, cleaning the house and doing what she does. Then she has access to DSTV. She has access to Netflix, but this is while she's working. So as you can see, she's multivalent in that she's got multiple touch points, both that are considered high LSM and then of course the township media. So it's understanding that this is actually her lived reality. So most brands don't think like that. They think there's high LSM audiences, then there's township audiences, and they then do media schedules that then face each of these. And the problem with them, of course, is this lack of fundamental understanding means you're overspending in some instances, you're underspending in others, and you're duplicating. There's a lot of media wastage because the same Mavis has consumed your message multiple times unknowingly because you think she only goes on taxis and doesn't see Netflix or doesn't see DSTV as an example. So that's the first thing I want to debunk, is that understanding the consumer for me is how are you framing the consumer in the first place? So township audiences, if you really want to kind of go down that lane, I'd say is understanding how they commute. There are such extreme lived realities that it's important to understand them and understand them in context, so that when you start talking marketing, you do so from that place of knowledge.
I think it's such a valid message, and in the separate space, Senna and I talk about these kinds of conversations very often, which is why they resonate so well here in this space. But I want to touch in a little bit closer on. So we speak about consumers are consumers, right? But are there any cultural and economic factors that we need to consider when we're speaking to different consumers?
Yes. So the answer is absolutely yes. There are. And again, I think all of these then start being business and category specific, right? So if we're talking from an FMCG perspective or even a retail perspective, we can be a lot more broader. There's less constraints because you're talking to just buying consumers. But the moment you get into very specific categories, let's say you're talking nappies, right? Then of course there's socioeconomic factors you must think about, distribution, access to those things. So I think there are layers that begin to be necessary to think about the more detailed you are, the more specific about the job to be done you are. Right. So socioeconomic factors, obviously in the townships, we know, again, a little bit of history, township spatial planning. You think about, how over time, 30 years plus into democracy, there's been a massive growth in economic. In fact, so much so that they changed the term from mass market to main market. Why? Because they started to understand the power of the spending power in the townships, right? That's why garages and malls and shopping centers started blooming in those spaces, and they started thriving. Why? Because there's always been money in the townships. It's just, it was never understood in terms of how that money moved, right? So for me, there's socioeconomic factors to consider. And we know there are even some townships that have higher LSM audiences, right? There's certain parts in certain townships that are actually more as premium as Sandton in terms of just spending power. In some instances, like, Deep Kloof in Soweto is very upmarket versus Shawela, right? As an example, or Tembisa. There's Hospital View in Tembisa that's more high LSM than Kobeni section. So there are macro and microeconomic factors that have to be considered. Some of them are location-based, some of them are culture-based. It just depends entirely on what is the context and what's the job to be done by which business. So which business are we talking to? If I'm talking from a space where I'm servicing Old Mutual, there's different considerations for that versus Pampers. So for me, in order for me to answer your question more specifically, because I think about it like this, and I do this on purpose, Stacey, because I'm trying to debunk the way that marketers and agencies think about mass market / main market audiences across townships. So there's too many variables, but the variables are there for you to be able to take advantage of in order to make much more strategic business and marketing decisions.
It's so interesting because, as you said, there are so many variables, but then how do we begin to understand sort of like the building blocks of building brand loyalty? What matters more to this consumer? Is it word of mouth? How can brands build that sort of loyalty? How do they begin to start that?
So if they're wanting to market to, let's call it main market consumers, it's to understand what are the things that drive them, right? So a lot of these audiences are driven by a couple of things. One is community. Community is massively important. The second is family. The third is economic freedom. All of them are striving to get a job, get economically active, to be able to afford a particular lifestyle, right? So those are the things that drive these, generically speaking, right? So if a brand wants to be able to connect with these consumers, my strong recommendation is to have a utility approach. Help them and help their lives be a little bit easier. So because, in fact, I used to argue with my advertising lecturer about brand loyalty. His argument was brand loyalty doesn't exist. And he would argue on the basis that the moment a better offer from another brand comes up, a consumer is much more likely to take up that offer versus fight and retain paying a nominal premium on a brand that they've been so loyal to, right? And I understood fully where he came from. And I think in some instances, absolutely that applies, especially now we're in an economic recession, really. But I say all that to say, in order for you to really build a deep emotional connection with these audiences, you have to find a way to connect with the things that drive them, right? And there are a few things here. One of them is cultural nuance. So if you speak to an audience and speak to them in a way that says, I see you. So in isiZulu, the greeting that says Sawubona is powerful because it's an anthropological acknowledgement of a person. It says, I see you, right? So if you, in your advertising, in your marketing, do that, that's how you build loyalty. And Nando's has done a bloody good job of that because they use the kind of language that their consumers speak. So they're saying, I see you, in a very indirect, but very subtle and intelligent way. So it's about appealing to, the things that matter to them, the things that drive them. It's appealing to their cultural identity and nuances, as well as appealing to their dreams, right? So, aspirational brands to this day continue to be amazingly powerful, especially against the mass market audiences, because they tell the dream very, very well. And so they allow those consumers to say, one day when I arrive, that's what I'm going to wear. That's why to this day, they'll go, one day when I arrive, I'm going to buy an M3. One day when I arrive, I'm buying a C63, right? So because those brands are saying, dream, this is what success looks like. Because obviously that's what drives them, attaining success.
Donald, can you expand expand a little bit because I'm on the aspirational element of
Sure.
sort of like the drivers, because you know, anyone listening to this podcast right now may be thinking, okay, township economy, the phenomenon of izikotani. I was telling my producer about it in the background,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I was saying it's actually so much more nuanced. So brands that we historically think or wouldn't typically think would be associated with the sort of consumer, actually we find that there's a loyalty there with drinks like Hennessy or Jameson. So can you begin to unpack that aspirational element and to anyone who can't wrap their heads around it, right?
We have to take it back to history because these are let's call it socioeconomic factors that influence behaviors. So township spatial planning, originally the townships were built inside low-scape environments that are behind factories, that had no view of the horizon to prevent the people living in townships from dreaming big. And you'll know this because real estate that is facing the horizon is often more expensive than real estate that isn't. Now, what happened indirectly is that it then created these archetypes of characters that exist in townships. You've got the Pantsolas, you've got the bourgeois, the MCs or Abomrepa, you've got the slay queens, you've got the izikotanes, right? So all of these are archetypes of characters that emerge as a result of trying to build something, to forge something out of themselves because of the difficulty they find themselves in. Now, aspiration from a township perspective comes from because the pursuit is consistently about economic growth, about improvement. I need to improve my life. The wearing, the buying, and the consuming of high-end products is a metaphorical extension of that desire. It's to say, if you see me drinking Hennessy, it means I've made it. It means I'm one of those. So it comes from that place, which means that these consumers will oftentimes save up, sacrifice, even get into debt to be able to be seen to be purchasing and enjoying these high-end products because they want to manage the perception that I'm moving. There's upward mobility in me. I'm not just a guy from the township. I'm one of those. I'm that guy. So to be seen as that guy, and that's why, in fact, I laughed recently when I saw a meme that showed the juxtaposition of a person who's really wealthy and a person who's, they call it new money syndrome, right? The person who's trying to appear to be wealthy. So they've got all these brand names adorned from top to bottom, but the person who's really wealthy has got like plain Jane, wearing unique from, Checkers, because his priorities is an investment, it's an asset. But this one's priority is to be seen to be wealthy, right? So the mindset is also very, very different because there's obviously a miseducation, a lack of education of finances and things like that. So those archetypes come from that place of we love luxury brands because they represent upward social mobility and they represent the kind of wealth we desire to experience and enjoy. And so this is why when they do get it, they'll drive back to the township to go and show it off.
And I love that so much, Donald, because we actually talk about that at Kantar very frequently, where we talk about the fact that, yes, money is tight in so many wallets. And yes, there will be down trading and there will be trying out of cheaper products. But if we can build demand and desire for our products by tapping into the needs that consumers have and their mindset, as you've described it, aspirational, then we will be able to create situations where people put money aside to make sure that they continue to access you, even when times are really, really tough. You know what I would love to touch on, Donald, simply because I'm actually such a big fan, is of the MoyaApp. So I'd like to know a little bit more about it. I want to know how it's solving for things like digital inclusion, access to branding and marketing. So tell me a little about that.
Excellent. So MoyaApp is what I describe as a utility super app. We solve people's data issues, right? So in my tenure as the CEO of Out There Media, I learned a very powerful fact, which was there were 2.6 billion please call me sent between MTN and Vodacom alone every single month. 2.6 billion please call me. Now, when I grew up, we would send a please call me when you don't have airtime, right? And we would even customize the end of it to say, please call, come outside. That's how we would go and check up on our girlfriends. We didn't have airtime. And so I say all that to say that is an indicative of how much data is still a challenge in South Africa. What MoyaApp does is it solves for that. Originally, MoyaApp actually started off as a live live scores app. So there was a little bit of marketing thrown behind it, and there was only 27,000 downloads achieved. So one thing to understand why that was the case, there was research done across multiple townships, and there were two main insights that came out of it. The first, digital barrier, of course, right? Data cost barrier, very, very high. So we added in data-free chat as the first thing, and immediately, without any marketing, 100,000 downloads within the first month and counting. Then the second thing we found that was very interesting as an insight, which most businesses don't know to this day, Stacey, which is storage space barrier. The fact that most entry-level smartphones don't have enough space, so they can't afford to have an app for every single thing. So those businesses to this day that still create apps and say, we'll just build an app, they're going to struggle with downloads, and they are struggling with downloads because of that very reason, that most of the main market, you're actually wrestling between 6 and 8 apps on a person's phone. On average, the main market, that is, right? You're too high, listen, you probably don't mind. I imagine your iPhone 18 is probably putting certain apps to sleep because you don't use them, right? But they don't have that space. So they'll even download an app as essential as a Capitec banking app, use it, then delete it so that they can have enough space for memes and content in general, right? Because even just the operating system is so heavy. So the storage space barrier was the biggest insight and the challenge. So what we then did is we introduced what we call a discover section, which is what makes us a super app. We wrapped 300 web apps in one environment. So when you click discover, there's 300 web apps that you can access without needing to download the specific APK or the native app. So in them accessing that, some of it is data free, some of it is not. Whatever is not data free is data light. So that was another way in which, so in there, we've got amazing content. Like we've got the Bible translated in, or the holy books translated in multiple languages, data free. We've got newspapers, some newspapers data free. We've got sporting content. We've got children's books. We've got a whole host of stuff that makes the lives of our main market consumers easier. They can chat. So the chat will always be data free, the text that is, which means there's no need for a please call me. In the emergency situation, you can actually have a fully fledged conversation with your loved ones, data free, always. Right. And then in Discover, you'll always have content that's empowering. There's job portals that are data free. There's a whole host of stuff. So that's really what MoyaApp is. It's a utility super app that helps the lives of main market consumers to live better lives. We bridge the digital divide and we get them to be able to have access to digital services data free.
Donald, that was so great, because what you're doing there is solving for exactly what you said, which was some of the challenges that consumers experience simply by living and meeting them based on those needs. And then I guess the one up to that is that you also enable brands to access consumers by giving them the opportunity to speak in that kind of concierge environment. Some of the ones that I recall seeing were you could buy your insurance in there, or you could look at different banking products. It's just such a wonderful way to connect with consumers. What I'd love to know is how does if brands wanted to be within MoyaApp, how does the data purchase agreement work? Because as you say, they're either minimally data intensive or zero rated in its entirety. Is that funded by brands?
Excellent question, Stacey. So there's two parts of that to that question. The first is for us to be able to enable users to be able to chat to each other data free, we fund that. So that's part of our cost of sales, as it were. So it's part of our business, including some of the content, like them accessing, for instance, Isolezwe, the isiZulu newspaper. They access that data free because we pay for it. Now, that's one part of it. The second part is brands when they come in, because naturally we're a platform that then allows for brands to connect to these consumers using these various ways. And we are underpinned by a technology called reverse bill data. What it means is that somebody obviously is paying for the data cost that the consumers are consuming. And when brands get involved, we make them pay for that data cost. So they remove that barrier to entry. So, and what I like about that is what it's saying, when a brand comes on board, they're saying, I want to engage with you, Senna, but I don't want you to pay or use your own data in order for you to hear about my product, my service, or to buy something from me. We've got banking clients, we've got ShopRite who distribute their e-catalogs in there, which is amazing because we're saving trees. Now they can start printing pamphlets and distribute their catalogs digitally. But there's a sophistication to that, in that you can then geofence, the location. Based on the user's locations who are looking at the e-catalogs, they can only then have access to e-catalogs of the ShopRite checkers that are closest to them. You can start really, moving the needle from a marketing and a sales perspective. So also while, making the lives of the users easier and really driving more efficiency. So yes, that's the answer in terms of the data cost. It's reversible data. We pay for a portion of it, and the other portion is paid for by the clients, especially when there's advertising campaigns or anything of the like.
Fantastic. Two things. How many users do you guys have on the app? And then once you're done with that, I would love to know some successful brand campaigns that you've run through the app.
Sure. At the moment, we've got 4 million active users. Interestingly, we've culled it that way because we were obviously managing quite a number of things and introducing new products. And because we pay for the data cost, obviously we needed to make sure that it's sustainable. So we had almost kept it at 4 million, but we're growing at about 100,000 users per month at the moment. Again, still no advertising, just word of mouth. So it's growing, and it's growing organically and beautifully. In time, the plan is for eventually for us to go to the same level of ubiquity as WhatsApp. Because ultimately, if you think about it, we're like the WeChat for South Africa or the WeChat for Africa. Because my plan obviously is to launch it across Africa and the BRICS countries as well. So that is where we're at. We're at 4 million active users. Within a month, sometimes we see between 5 and 6 because we get a cohort of users that come in to access SASSA grants data free inside our environment. So they come in just to access SASSA grants, and then here and there they might access other content. The second part to that question is some of the amazing case studies. Oh my God, there's plenty. ShopRite is certainly one of them. APSA is a more recent example. So they recently launched a product called Chat Wallet. Now, Stacey, I know you and Senna are like, marketing fundies, and you would know that in a tech platform like MoyaApp, the best user journey would be to keep them in that environment, right? Not take them elsewhere. And I always argue this about when advertisers do advertising, for instance, on social media, if a user clicks on your thing and then you are taking them to your website, you're breaking the user journey. I'm not there for your advert, I'm there for Facebook as an example, right? So I always say that breaks the user journey. So similarly, APSA Chat Wallet, we're taking people from this environment to WhatsApp, which is obviously not ideal. I go, no, don't do that. But, due to logistics and stuff, we needed to keep it that way. That said, the campaign performed so well. At the time, we needed, our target KPI was 6,000 leads over a 3-month period. And within a 75-day period, not 90, we had produced 10,200 leads. And they were converting at a higher rate than other platforms. So their benchmark for conversion was 6%. We were converting at 7.7%. So not only are our users more sticky, they convert better. Why? Because what we've done is we've built a very close, intimate relationship between our users in that they trust that when we bring a brand to them, we've thought about their lives, we've thought about who they are and what matters to them. So they're so, it's as if I briefed them personally. I said, listen, guys, you need to give me a high click-through rate here. And they click everything and they fill out everything, So it's an incredible audience. So that's one of the best campaigns that we ran more recently. And there's a few others. As a Capitech, we're running a consumer financial education campaign where they're launching, obviously, content and teaching people about finances. And again, that saw incredible engagement rates, incredible click-throughs, and so on and so on. So there's plenty. But what I can tell you is on average, we perform at not less than 7% click-throughs.
Donald, that is absolutely incredible. And I think I always say that it's the youth and entrepreneurs that are at the forefront of solving society's most pressing problems. So I guess my question as an entrepreneur yourself is, can you explain to brands why courageous collaboration with entrepreneurs that understand the space is so important? And secondly, I call myself the Cancer Gen Z expert. But what is the most surprising trend you're sort of seeing amongst young people? Because I see a value I see amongst young people, especially in townships, is entrepreneurship and that hustle. So can you comment on that?
Brands are still stuck in their old ways. The guys who make the decisions, who sign the checks, are very traditional. They don't move at the same speed. It's almost like, I laugh, it's like technology and the world is moving faster than the decision makers can keep up. The young people and the culture of the young people, the edgy, big, crazy ideas is moving faster than the brands can keep up. And it's primarily because the people who make the decisions on how to match these audiences are the ones who are laggards, at least psychologically. They don't really match up. So there's so much merit in partnering with young, edgy creatives, dynamic, who are very technology forward. There's so much power in that. And I've seen recently, I was privileged to be a judge at the Marketing Achievement Awards, and we were judging the resonance category. And one of my favorite case studies, I can't mention the brand, was a product where they co-created the product with the audience and they launched it. and they did an empowerment platform, and that gave them the ability to really grow themselves as a result. So they're calling it influencer marketing these days, but it's always been seen as brand ambassadorship back in the days, right? But it's the same principle. It's a principle of partnering together to build together. So there's so much merit in that, and I'm very much pro that. And to answer your second part of your question is, what trends have I seen from the youth? We're seeing a lot of thrifters come onto the platform, obviously because they can chat data free, so they can stretch that student budget. So in a very kind of inadvertent way, MoyaApp is almost formalizing the vendor, solopreneur, side hustle kind of, informal vendors. They get on the platform and they start seeing opportunities. One of the other two things we do really well in MoyaApp is we enable our users to make money. So they can sign up to be part of Moya Quiz, where they can enter the quiz and earn some money, or they enter our research panel, because we've got, arguably the largest mass market research. We've got about 400,000 people in the country on MoyaApp in the main market research space. In fact, we do work with you guys. You guys buy our panel data because of that. So, which I appreciate, by the way. So in that space, they sign up to the panel to answer these questionnaires, and they earn money, right? So they do that. And then what do? They put their money back into the ecosystem to try and grow that money. That's another trend that I've started seeing. So they do things that allow them to grow the money that they've earned, either through, their own thrifting, or, through their panel research or quiz, or when they've won a competition. If a brand, for instance, comes in and runs a competition, the money they win there, they reinvest to try and grow that money.
That thrifting boom, I'm also seeing. That is absolutely fascinating. Another thing which we speak about, obviously, is Africa being this next sort of hub of exponential growth, given its young population. And so we have been getting some briefs from international brands and global brands looking to now starting to invest in Africa. And I guess, what are some of the things that global brands need to be cognizant of if they were to ever even step foot in this sort of space?
Oh, I love that question. I'd say the first thing that they need to think about is, or be conscious of, is who are we talking to? What drives it? Because I think the biggest mistake most international brands tend to do is they tend to talk down to their audiences, especially in Africa. There's almost like this misconception that we're walking around with lions in our backyards, right? And that we don't know what Google is. So there's, I'm obviously hyperbolizing, but the point I'm making is there's a deep need to understand the audience. So that understanding of the audience is critical. Sometimes, and this is going to be controversial, sometimes you don't need to control the narrative. Your consumers already have a narrative about your brand. All you need to do is let go. So most brands, they'll come with a narrative and they'll want to, and I've seen this, it's so many times. Global brands will come in with a global creative that's it's signed off in London and we have to execute it. Let's adapt it a little bit for Africa. They do that, right? And then when they launch, it doesn't land because it's like, who are these people, right? Meanwhile, the brands, the consumers themselves already have a narrative about the brand. And I said this about Hennessy as well. I said, Hennessy don't realize that there's already a culture about Hennessy. There's already a thing about why we consume Hennessy, when we consume Hennessy. And I wonder if they're aware of it, because they just keep doing these global brands of sophistication. I'm like, your audiences are hip hop lovers. They don't care about that sophistication. They like you for the cool factor. So this is what I mean. Let go. Let them define what you are to them. Understand that and then build on that. And this goes back to your earlier point about partnership. You see why there's an opportunity where there's no longer a need for you to just solely be responsible for an amazing creative that you then do. If you understand fully why they consume you, where they see, and you build with them in that, then you really create, almost like you tangle with your audience, as opposed to, doing a top-down approach.
Do you know what I loved about that example, the Hennessy example, is I bet you there are a number of, let's call them influencers, people who have influence in these spaces, who are already creating content around Hennessy that has nothing to do with that main brand that's being pushed at people, right? So they're co-creating the future of that brand in South Africa for South Africans. And it's such a, and it really points to the influence that influencers have if they understand the consumers that they're working for. And I kind of want to touch on that idea of influencers. I mean, marketers love to work with an influencer, right? And they also love to try and control the narrative, as you say, which isn't always very possible or the right thing to do. Right. What kind of influencers do you think resonate within, and now I'm too afraid to say township consumer space, but it's kind of like consumers that we know we're talking to when we're talking about South Africans and real, who South Africa is?
Oh man, don't worry, all context observed. Just so we're together on that township reference. I think it differs, man, for different categories, right? But I'll answer your question by just addressing the principle. So the principle is, who are the most quintessential representatives of our customers, right? So if I am, let's say, Hennessy, who is a quintessential representative of a Hennessy drinker? And that persona is who I must find an influencer that fits that persona, because it'll be organic more than anything. If anything, it'll allow you to actually allow them to draft the script, because they're already drinking Hennessy. They're already doing, So for me, that's how you should approach influencer marketing is understanding the quintessence, like the essential, the epicenter of your customer. So the influencer must mirror that. If your influencer doesn't mirror that and you're doing this aspirational thing, it doesn't work. And I've seen most brands make that mistake. Then the second thing for me is allowing your influencers an organic voice, right? And you've seen paid partnership campaigns where you're like, but you don't normally talk like this. This is not why I follow you, man. You're usually funnier than this. Why are you? But because you can see it's a paid partnership, and obviously the poor influencer is trying to make money, then you're like, fine, I'll just click on it to support you. But that's where brands start getting it wrong, because we see that, right? As a follower of that particular influencer, you can see how that brand is changing that influencer's voice, how they speak, how they do things. So that's not okay. So that's also where they get it wrong, is allow the actual influencer to have their organic voice, to be themselves. Of course, there's brand guidelines and all sorts of things. That's, protocol observed. But then allow for the organicity to happen on its own as well, because that's actually what's going to drive deeper resonance with their audiences. Because the whole point of you using an influencer is for them to pull more audiences who already follow them and trust them, right? And to associate them with your brand.
Yeah. If you attend any kind of marketing trends talk, everybody's going to tell you that consumers, audiences, however you want to define us, we want authentic content. And so every marketer knows that. But when it actually gets served to them as the picture for how to make authentic content, suddenly, oh no, I'm terrified of which direction this can go in. And fair enough, but also trust the process, I think, and trust the fact that as consumers and as content creators, this is the way that things work now. So letting go needs to be part of the formula. Yeah.
Letting go, man. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know what I want to ask you? We have all kinds of media touch points, not only within townships, but within consumer spaces. So I'm talking TikTok, community radio, spaza branding, wall murals, taxi rank, whatever. Which one of those work for a township consumer? And that's an unfair question in the context that a township consumer exists within an entire journey, a work journey, as you described earlier. But what are the kind of ones that work when we're talking about being inside the township? If it's the weekend, if it's,
So I'll say out of home is one of the best media channels you have, definitely for township audiences. But again, you have to be specific to your category at the time. So out of home is powerful. The wall murals, I would say always elevate the game. So HD wall murals, and make sure there's Wi-Fi enabled in there, because as they hang out in that spots, the Wi-Fi, they connect online, you get to serve them mobile advertising, right? So they love social media. Social media is still a powerful thing, even in township media, but you can make it proximity based in some instances, right? You can make it geo-fenced as well. So social media is still very powerful. TV, we're still a heavy TV market. We're still a very heavy TV market, although the habits of watching TV are changing, and it's important to take that into account. Now there's OTT platforms. So what OTT platforms? Again, segment specific, category specific. You might dial up or dial down certain OTT platforms. And then I'd say community radio. Community radio is also incredibly powerful, and it's highly underutilized. There's so much power in community radio. There's so much power in the narrative and storytelling that you can do on community radio that you can't in commercial radio stations. And so it's always underlooked in favor of the more popular radio stations. But there's numbers. I mean, we've seen Josie FM now actually supersede and compete with the likes of YFM in terms of numbers, right? They're up there. They're almost a commercial radio station. So there's power in that. There's certainly that. Then I'd say some commuter media, which again, partly part of it is out of home, like some taxi TV branding or some of the Wi-Fi enabled stuff. I would definitely add MoyaApp in there because your users are on MoyaApp anyway, right? Especially the township audiences, they're on MoyaApp. So so it's these technology platforms. I'd say these are some of the broader media channels, again, without being category specific or audience specific, that I would say resonate across the board. That I would absolutely consider in a media mix when doing a strategy to reach these audiences.
Yeah, fabulous. And you know what's great is that we run an annual study here at Cantel called the Mzansi Barometer, and we're going to be the results will come out in June this year. We will quantify the size of those different media touchpoints, both within South Africa as well as in townships. So I will definitely.
I can't wait to read that.
Yeah. Oh no, you're not just reading it, you're getting an invite to the event where we launch it, I think.
Thank you.
Donald, our time is nearly running out, but I need to ask you, everybody's talking about the rise of technology. We're all talking about AI. What do you see the sort of latest developments? How do you see them changing how brands engage with township consumers?
I love that. So I think the fundamental question is, how are township audiences seeing AI? Do they understand it? Do they see the utility in it? And the second question I always ask is, have the LLMs, the large language models in AIs, starting to understand cultural nuance? Do they know what the definition of guababa is or riz? You know what I'm saying? So there's that. There's a utility to AI that I think is obviously very powerful, but I think there's a deeper educational job that needs to be done against the audiences so they can better understand AI, to better use it. Because guys, AI is all prompts based. So if your prompt is crap, your output will be crap. And it's still in the early stages where, a lot of the AI platforms aren't accurate in their gathering of information. They'll tell you confidently that 1 + 1 = 3, as if they know for a fact. So there's still those areas. It's still in its nascent, it's still early stages of AI. So I think the job to be done for us as an industry is to help consumers better understand the utility of AI and the power of the prompts. And secondly, for us to teach the AI LLMs on cultural nuance so they can be better suited to understand, if I'm experiencing guava. Guys, I'll tell you a funny story. We've got a chatbot called Lisedi on MoyaApp, and our users are already starting to think that it's AI. So they'll chat to, it's an onboarding chatbot, just onboards you on how MoyaApp works. So they're starting to give it Sis Dolly vibes. They're saying, oh, my heart just got broken. I don't know why she cheated on me. Now, Polly said he's just a chatbot. She doesn't know what to say. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm going to have to accelerate my AI endeavors here and start really infusing a little bit of cultural nuance into that. So there's certainly power in AI, but I think the job to be done is just the education around it, especially again, there's just this audience, because you guys are sophisticated. You probably are using AI for everything. You probably are drafting your emails on AI, but there's something, it's still in its early stages, and it's lacking a lot of cultural nuance, right? So there's a job to be done as an industry to make it a hell of a lot more relevant to our markets and our users. Yeah. So yeah.
I'm dying at users asking, how do I deal with guababa? How do I even begin to explain that?
Exactly. Stacey, guababa is the fear of approaching a potential girlfriend. Is when you need to go and spit game, try and convince her to go out on a date with you. Yeah. So the fear of doing that, that's called guababa. It's a very old township slang phrase. Sorry, I forgot.
Consider myself schooled. I like it.
Yeah. It's in the glossary of terms in the book, so you'll find it there.
Donald, Senna, I don't know about you, but I swear this has been one of my favorite interviews. I have just loved the energy. I feel like I've learned so much. It's been honestly the biggest treat having you join us here today. And I guess just before we go, we want to ask you to let everybody know where they can find your book. And obviously what we'll do as well is just share some links to your social media pages and things. So where can we find your book, Donald?
Thank you so much. Firstly, thank you guys for having me on the platform. You guys can find my book in exclusive books, any major bookstore, online, on Amazon, on Kindle, on Take-A-Lot. In terms of my socials, you can also find Donald Mokgale or Donald the Neo Sapien also on YouTube. If you want to check out a little bit of my poetry works, you can also see a little bit of that. I always laugh when I Google and YouTube the old poetry that I used to do. It's still dope, but it's just like, oh my God, I was so young, pre-beard Donald. That's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Amazing. Thank you. So, guys, to all of our listeners, thanks for tuning in. We loved having you here today. And for any other information, you can follow us on X and on LinkedIn. And please hit the subscribe button as well. Really helps us. And until next month, we'll see you then.